After a year-long hiatus and one crappy thank you video later, this is the reward you get. A video that is none of the options I gave you in my other video. Cue new intro! Welcome, my name's Daisy Maisie, and this is Thought Shots of a Video Gamer. In this series, I aim to analyze and brainstorm ideas about the video game world and all of its intricacies. And if you think this is some sort of ripoff of game theory, then I'm sorry you think that way, but this is much different. Kind of. This new show, rather than come up with theories about video games using logic, math, and evidence, uses philosophical thinking and opinions that come up with hypotheses. Think of it like this. Matt may have come to the conclusion that the Zelda hookshot would cripple Link's arm and possibly bind him, but if I were to look at it, I would say that the hookshot is pretty darn awesome to have a mechanism that has enough power to even accomplish this, and the creator of it must be insane to hide it in a graveyard, and then hide the upgrade in the water temple. See? Similar, but different. Anyway, this video isn't about arguing over the similarities to a popular YouTube show, this is about video games. And this premiere is going to focus on the way we've been judging games, which might be a bit skewed. So sit back and get comfortable, because this gamer is going to go all Socrates up in the video game world. So, for years now, the question of what makes a video game good has been the topic of argument for many fans, and everyone has their own take on the whole thing. Some say that the mechanics are what make them good, others say that the story or atmosphere, and some even say it's a mixture. But something about these answers always bothered me, and for the longest time I couldn't figure out why. That is, until I had an epiphany. Video games rely on all aspects to be good, but don't necessarily need them all to be great. It's a lot like a pyramid. All levels are important to be a good work of art, but if you take one out, it isn't suddenly an eyesore. Heck, some of the levels might be made of different materials and still stand out as a solid pyramid, and that's how video games are too. A game can be good as long as some of the core elements are solid, but some elements are admittedly more important than others. One could say that the bigger the pyramid, the better the game. I guess the question is now, what elements are the most important for a game to stand taller than others? Well, the first thing we need to know is what makes up a video game. That way we can work out how important they are when compared to each other. I did a bit of digging around, and I'd say the most common answers were mechanics, story, personal experiences, social capabilities, and sensory details. There were more, but generally most of what was mentioned falls into one of these categories. So how would I stack these? Well, I can safely say that mechanics is the most important thing for our pyramid, because mechanics are the foundation of every game. If a game has terrible controls, or the interactivity is limited to button mashing every 10 seconds, then it's pretty safe to say that the game would be considered a bad game even if the story is really well done. Much like how a foundation of a house keeps everything from falling down, the mechanics and interactivity are key to building a solid game. Take that away and you're left with nothing but a movie. Take everything else away from the mechanics and you simply have a game like Tetris or Pong, which are still considered good but lack any of the other traits that I mentioned before. For example, let's take a look at two games that are known for its controls and mechanics, Super Meat Boy and Half-Life. Super Meat Boy has tight platforming controls that allow the player great mobility and control, so when they inevitably die, they don't feel like it was the mechanics to blame, only their lack of skill. This is a problem that most games face, having the controls feel good enough that the player only has himself to blame. And more often than not, a game fails to be mechanically sound enough that difficulty is mistaken for broken. Another good example of mechanics is the Half-Life series.
So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Okay, so the controls of Half-Life aren't the only reason they're popular, but if I asked any person what the best part of Half-Life is, they'd probably say the physics engine. The engine is so popular, in fact, that someone took it and created their own game, aka Gmod. And as we all know, a lot has been done with it.
Pronounce salsa correctly, Donnie.
Salsa.
No.
1 second.
Oh,
Yes! Where were they?
Killing
them all.
Who's that?
Let's kill them all. Let's kill them all.
What did you just do?
I'm upside down.
How did that even happen?
I don't know.
In short, mechanic-driven games are the games without the bells and whistles. They stand out on their own, but can still stand tall with all the other traits. And without them, games wouldn't even exist. Mechanics give game its essential base, even if it's simple, such as a platformer or racing game. A game can survive with just mechanics, but can't live without them. That's what makes them a perfect base to my pyramid. So next would be story, since story builds the desire to continue and finish the game. A good game can even cover for the mechanics at times if they're subpar. Story gives the player a goal to accomplish and invites them to become immersed in the world and all its lore. Story sets the scene, adds the characters, gives you a goal to reach, and even emits the entire atmosphere for what the game will be like. Take Mario, for instance. In almost every game you're given a simple rescue the princess from the scary monster tail, but this also tells you that the game is going to be simplistic, which reflects the simple mechanics. Adversely, you can spice up the simple game with a complex story, giving life to an otherwise bland game. Off would be a great example of this, since the complex and intricate story adds to the simple mechanics. Even when the story is simple, players are given a reason to care. Take a completely story-driven game, for example. Telltale's Walking Dead series is essentially just a point-and-click adventure with some quick-time events thrown in. But I can safely say that anyone who has played the game has felt the raw emotion the game emits. We feel every struggle the characters go through. We want to see them come to a happy ending. We emphasize with every moment these characters exist, not because the mechanical parts are fun to do, but because the cunning craftsmanship of the lore and world draws us in like a moth to flame. Story is the drive to complete the game, even though the player is actually just a person sitting in front of a screen pressing buttons. We didn't cry at the end of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky because we moved forward a square. We didn't quiver in Five Nights at Freddy's because we closed a door. We didn't feel the game because of the mechanics. We lived it because of the story. Story is the lifeline of the game, giving it the passion and atmosphere that pushes gamers to completing it, a fitting complement to mechanics. On top of story would be sensory detail, or the art and music. Sensory detail is a coat of paint on the new house, the attractive force that amplifies the experience of the game. Games with a unique sensory detail stand out more than ones with bland and overused ones. Okami, for instance, is so often remembered because of the gorgeous art style and breathtaking music. It gives Okami its identity and permission to stand out among other games, while most FPSs can barely be distinguished from each other due to the similar grounded tones and sounds. Ooh, shots be fired at a flame shield! Seriously though, a game's graphic detail is basically the frosting on the cake. Not very important, but will certainly make a game better for being what it needs to be. Now I do realize that some great games don't have spectacular art design or stellar music, but the only thing sensory detail needs to do is fit. A game doesn't need to be the most realistic or groundbreaking graphics, but the world needs to reflect the tone and emotion the game is going for. Things like TF2, Battlefield 3, and Neverending Nightmares are good examples of the graphics being the perfect fit. So much so that it doesn't distract the player from the game, but helps with that whole atmosphere I was talking about before. And don't even get me started on the music. Music is the true resonant frequency of the heart, no question about it, and they amplify the atmosphere. Not to mention cueing the player to the world around them. Look at any good horror game and you'll see what I mean. It makes something as simple as moving across the overworld seem like a grand adventure waiting to unfold. So, sensory detail, though not necessary, is one of the best parts of a game for what it adds to the experience. The top piece would be social capabilities, or basically the multiplayer. Personally, I find this to be the least important when creating a game, since a game should function as a game before you try and add more players. If a game doesn't function as a game, chances are the multiplayer sucks. But if all the other prerequisites have been fulfilled, then having a multiplayer feature can really add to the experience, such as Minecraft. By itself, Minecraft can stand on its own as a great game about mining and crafting, but the online multiplayer makes it that much better. Some games even thrive off the concept of multiplayer, mainly in the racing, fighting, and shooter genres, since games like those are all the more better when experiencing it with another. I couldn't imagine Super Smash Bros. Brawl without playing it with my sister, and playing Pokemon alone is just sad. Games can really shine with others to enjoy it, but it's never restricted by it. Being an introvert that I am, multiplayer never really spoke to me like it does to others, but let me just say that the times I've played games with my friends, even if I sucked at the game, made the whole thing better because we did it together. We were winning together. Even when we were against each other, like in Halo, I had much more fun playing with them because we could all just joke around and shoot stuff. This is why another game has fallen from my graces, despite its amazing gameplay and lore. But it's kind of a personal matter, and I'd rather not talk about it here, but take my word for it. LOL hasn't been much fun anymore because of a certain acquaintance of mine. Regardless, multiplayer is just the cherry on top of the ice cream. That sweet something that makes the whole thing better. I would say more, but I can imagine all of you watching know what I'm talking about when I say that video games are all the better when you have a player too. Now, I bet a lot of you are wondering where personal experiences fits into this, since the pyramid has already been filled. Don't worry, I didn't forget. Just bear with me on this one. Personal experience is the sun that shines down on the pyramid, giving the gaming pyramid its vibrant beauty. In other words, how a game works on the technical level or even on an artistic level doesn't matter if the player doesn't enjoy the game itself. Even the best games have haters, and those haters probably have bad experiences with the game, so all the good parts of the pyramid don't matter to them. An even better example is the games that aren't the best at the base level, but still have bans. Like Sonic 06, for example. The game is an atrocity, but I bet someone out there loves the game with all their heart because of the deep connection they have with the game despite all its flaws. It's human nature for people to like different things, even if they aren't well known or popular. I like a game that absolutely no one has heard about and no one bothers to talk about, but I love it because it was my childhood and the first true gaming experience I had. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Finding Nemo the video game. I love all these games, and yet no one talks about them. Maybe because they aren't the best games overall, and some are actually even dated, but I love them so much that I can overlook these flaws, and that's why personal experience is a crucial part to the pyramid. It doesn't determine the quality of the game, but the quality of the gamer's view of it. Experience is completely subjective, and if a person doesn't have a good time, then the game has failed to them. But it's also what makes the game so potent in this regard. Every person's experience is unique to them and them alone. Unlike a movie or music, video games are controlled by the player. A person who will determine whether a game is good or not based on the decisions and actions within the game, even if it's just a straight line. Everyone is different, and I bet there is a perfect game for everyone out there with this kind of thinking. Logically, it would be impossible to say there isn't. So there you have it, my pyramid of gaming. If you think that this is accurate, then feel free to leave a like, or comment down below saying what your pyramid of gaming is like. Do you value multiplayer over stories? Does the art of a game make it better than the controls? I can't wait to hear from you all. Thank you for watching, and remember, think logically, fight honorably, and have fun.